The Fort Bragg training grounds hummed with the familiar rhythm of routine, the scent of gunpowder, sun-baked metal, and the sweat of young soldiers honing standard tactical maneuvers. The North Carolina air hung thick and humid, promising another suffocating day. Spectre team worked seamlessly, drilling their movements for assaulting a simulated building until they were pure muscle memory. We were midway through a training cycle when an order came through the secure comms channel, shattering the day's schedule. The voice of the operations duty officer was mundane, but the phrasing itself: cease training immediately. Entire team report to Sector Delta Charlie. Top secret briefing sent a jolt of tension through me. No advance warning, no hints. Just an abrupt halt to planned activities and a summons to an isolated sector of the base, one accessible only to a select few. I, Captain Marcus Cole, Spectre's CO, gave the order to pack it up. My men, hardened by dozens of ops, asked no questions, but a current of unease ran through their movements. This wasn't a standard call-up. We piled into the Humvees, silently watching the familiar landscape of the training grounds recede behind us. Sector Delta Charlie was a nondescript complex of buildings encircled by an additional security perimeter. No identifying markers. This was where the most sensitive meetings and briefings took place. Inside, we were escorted to a windowless conference room, bathed in the cold, sterile light of fluorescent lamps. Already seated at the long table were two colonels from Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, our direct overseers. A pair of individuals in severe civilian suits, their State Department affiliation hinted at by their bearing and sharp, appraising gazes, and causing the most surprise, a high-ranking officer from the Mexican Army's Secretariat of National Defense, Sedena. His face an impassive mask. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, electric with unspoken tension. A large screen displayed a detailed map of the Sierra Madre Occidental mountain range in Mexico. Beside it, enlarged satellite images. One of the JSOC colonels began the briefing without preamble. He spoke of anomalous activity in the designated region. Satellite surveillance had detected a large, mobile biological signature emitting a high thermal reading. Something big, warm-blooded, moving through the inaccessible mountainous terrain. Then, materials from the Mexican side were displayed, police reports and photographs from recent incidents. Even for us, Delta operators who had seen our share of horrors, the images were shocking. Mutilated bodies torn apart with inhuman strength. Marks of enormous claws that had gouged deep into flesh and even bone. Imprints of massive fangs. The official cover story, the one Mexican support elements and the outside world were to know, sounded standard. A hunt for a new, particularly brutal drug cartel leader, known for his animalistic tactics of intimidation and murder. But looking at the photographs and feeling the palpable tension in the room, I knew this wasn't about a cartel. The colonel cut to the nature of the threat, choosing his words carefully. Unknown aggressive subject, extreme physical strength, a typical kill methods resembling a large predator attack. There was a passing mention of local legends about El Hombre Perro, the Dogman. It was presented as cultural folklore, an element of local color, but the way the officers exchanged glances made it clear they were taking this far more seriously than they let on. We were made to understand. Standard combat protocols might prove ineffective. The objective: identify the subject, assess the threat level, and subsequently neutralize it. at any cost. Maximum operational security was paramount. Then we were introduced to our liaison on the ground, Agent Miguel Ramirez, from Mexico's Center for Research and National Security, SIGHTINGS. A middle-aged man, ex-military, with a weather-beaten face and the eyes of someone who had seen the harsh realities of the Mexican mountains. He knew the region, the local dialects, and the customs intimately. He maintained a professional but distant demeanor. I immediately sensed that Ramirez knew far more than what was being said at the briefing. The equipment briefing confirmed the gravity of the situation. Our standard jungle operations kit was being augmented with enhanced thermal sights and observation devices, hypersensitive motion detectors, and acoustic sensors capable of detecting infrasound. Tacit authorization was given for heavy weaponry, M240B machine guns, M320 grenade launchers loaded with high explosive fragmentation and incendiary rounds. The possibility of requesting special high-penetration ammunition was mentioned. Command clearly expected an encounter with something very large, fast, and extremely durable. Among my men there was a mix of professional curiosity and healthy skepticism. We were soldiers, accustomed to dealing with human adversaries, however dangerous. Talk of a dogman drew smirks outside the briefing room. But the photos of the victims and the unprecedented level of secrecy forced us to approach the task with utmost seriousness. My primary job was to keep the team focused on tactics, teamwork, and survival, regardless of the nature of whatever we were about to face. We lifted off that same night. A C-17 Globemaster III transported us to a covert forward operating base on Mexican soil. From there, a nighttime halo, high-altitude low opening, jump into the designated drop zone deep in the Sierra Madre Mountains. Maximum stealth. The Mexican military was providing only an outer security cordon, miles away from our insertion point, unaware of our true objective. Darkness enveloped us as we exited the aircraft, plunging toward the unknown. Free fall through the darkness over unfamiliar territory always sharpens the senses. Wind roared past my ears until the silk canopies of our parachutes blossomed open with a sharp crack at the designated altitude, slowing our rapid descent into the night. Touchdown in the selected zone was uneventful, as soft as possible in mountainous terrain choked with dense forest. Fourth-generation night optics painted the world in ghostly green hues, allowing us to distinguish tree trunks, vines, and the uneven ground. The air was still, heavy with moisture, saturated with the scents of decaying leaves, damp earth, and unfamiliar tropical blossoms. The silence was near absolute, broken only by the chirping of nocturnal insects and the distant calls of unknown birds. It pressed in, creating a feeling of confinement beneath the dense jungle canopy. Linking up at the rendezvous point took mere minutes. The men moved silently, checking gear and weapons with practiced motions. 6 of us, myself, Captain Cole, Sergeant Frank Kowalski, my second in command, Staff Sergeant David Doc Harris, our medic, Corporal Samuel Ghost Jenkins, reconnaissance specialist, Sergeant Tony Rizzo, machine gunner, and Private First Class Kenji Cheng, rifleman. Each was a top-tier professional, yet even in their focused movements, an undercurrent of tension was palpable. Agent Ramirez was already waiting at the designated spot, materializing from the darkness as silently as a forest spirit. He blended perfectly with the surroundings, dressed in simple hiking gear that wouldn't mark him among locals. His face remained impassive, but his eyes carefully assessed each of us. He gave a curt nod and, in a low voice, relayed the latest intel. Another body had been discovered by local hunters just hours ago, about 5 miles north of our position. His demeanor remained an enigma. The flawless competence of a field agent combined with a poorly concealed anxiety that betrayed itself in the barely perceptible tension in his shoulders and his overly intense gaze. We moved toward the reported location. Moving through the jungle at night demanded maximum concentration. Tree roots snaked like traps underfoot. Vines snagged at our gear. And every careless step threatened to create noise that would sound deafening in the stillness. Ramirez led us confidently, choosing the safest path. The stench hit us from 100 yards out, a nauseating mix of dried blood, incipient decay, and a sharp, feral musk. It was akin to the smell of wet dog, but far more intense, pervasive, triggering a visceral revulsion. What we found in the beams of our tactical lights surpassed even the shocking photos from the briefing. The body of a man, judging by his clothes a local, was literally torn to pieces. Huge, ragged wounds with uneven edges spoke of the attacker's monstrous strength. Bones were snapped at unnatural angles, the ribcage crushed inward. A significant portion of the torso and one leg were missing, carried off. Blood saturated the ground around him, forming a dark, sticky zone. Doc Harris, donning gloves, began his initial examination, careful not to disturb the evidence. His face, under the green glow of his NVGs, was grim. He pointed to the tracks around the body. Deep prints in the soft earth belonged to a creature moving on 2 legs. The tracks were enormous, significantly larger than those of the biggest grizzly bear. The shape resembled the paw print of a large dog or wolf, but with distinct impressions of long, thick claws. Nothing like it existed in any forensic or zoological database. Harris shook his head. Bite force. Incredible. Bones crushed like matchsticks. On the trunks of nearby trees, 8 to 10 feet above the ground, were deep gouges left by claws, as if the creature was either incredibly tall or capable of climbing or leaping to considerable heights. Ramirez quietly noted that locals had long associated precisely such tracks and such brutality with El Hombre Perro. Just then, Sergeant Jones, our comms specialist, Jones was not introduced earlier, assuming a typo and the comms role belongs to someone else or Jones is introduced here. Let's assume Jones is the comms specialist introduced now for clarity. Reported problems. Satellite communications were experiencing severe interference. Static, hiss, and crackle plagued all frequencies. Our secure tactical radios were also glitching, short bursts of static, and sometimes, as Jones and Kowalski thought they heard, a low, guttural growl seemed to bleed through the noise, its source untraceable. An attempt to contact base to clarify the interference situation only confirmed it. Command was detecting anomalous radio interference in the region, but the cause was unknown. All of us, myself included, began to experience a distinct oppressive feeling, the sensation of being watched. Not just by an enemy sniper or a cartel ambush. This was different. A primal sense of a large, dangerous predator nearby. A gaze from the darkness that sent a chill down the spine despite the suffocating heat and humidity. The forest ceased to be just challenging terrain. It felt like alien, hostile territory. Based on the tracks, the direction they led, and Ramirez's sparse guidance, we determined the subject's likely vector of movement. It was heading deeper into the mountains, into an uncharted, unmapped part of the Sierra. I made the call. Follow the trail at dawn. Employ hunter-killer tactics, moving in dispersed pairs and threes for better observation and mutual cover. The night would be spent on maximum readiness within a hastily fortified perimeter. The unknown was terrifying, but the mission was clear. We had to find out what this thing was. With the first rays of sunlight barely penetrating the dense green jungle canopy, we began our advance. The march deeper into unexplored territory proved grueling from the start. Thick, tangled vegetation snagged at our clothes and gear, forcing us constantly to hack our way through with machetes. The rugged terrain, with its steep ascents and descents, hidden ravines and slick rocks underfoot, slowed our pace. The maps of this area were inaccurate, more like schematic sketches than reliable navigation tools. The constant high humidity instantly soaked our uniforms with sweat, and the suffocating heat, even in the shade of the trees, sapped our strength. But the physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the crushing psychological atmosphere. The feeling that we weren't the hunters, but the prey, never left us for a second. The forest teemed with life, but now every rustle, every snapping twig was perceived as a potential threat. Soon the acoustic anomalies began, confirming our worst fears. At first they were barely perceptible sounds. The snap of a dry branch to our right when the entire group was moving straight ahead, or heavy, ragged breathing that seemed impossibly close. Just behind us, only for a sharp turn to reveal nothing. Pinpointing the source was impossible. Then, as we pushed deeper into the wilderness, more distinct and disturbing signals emerged. From a distance, echoing between the mountain slopes, came a blood-curdling howl. It resembled neither a wolf's cry nor a dog's bark. It was a long, deep sound, vibrating at a low frequency, invoking an instinctive primal fear. Sometimes it shifted to a low, guttural growl that seemed to come not from one point, but from everywhere at once, as if the very air vibrated with suppressed fury. Our portable acoustic sensors registered these anomalies, confirming they weren't figments of our imagination. But they couldn't pinpoint the source. The signal was too dispersed or moving with incredible speed. The technical malfunctions worsened. Thermal imagers, our primary means of detection in poor visibility, began to glitch. Periodically, large, blurred thermal signatures, consistent with the size of a large animal or person, would flicker onto the screens and vanish in a split second, preventing target lock or identification. False positives or something else. GPS navigators lost satellite lock for extended periods, making orientation extremely difficult. Tactical lights flickered inexplicably, and batteries in all our equipment, from radios to NVGs, drained significantly faster than normal, as if some unseen field were leeching their power. Tension within the squad mounted with each passing hour. The men, normally calm and focused professionals, grew sharper with each other, jumpy at every sound, suspicious of every shadow in their peripheral vision. Short, muffled arguments broke out about the direction of a sound, or whether someone had seen movement in the bushes. I had to intervene sharply several times, reminding them of discipline and the need to maintain composure. The sense of constant, unseen danger frayed nerves more than the physical exertion. We made camp for the night in a small, relatively open clearing surrounded by a dense wall of trees. We established a circular defensive perimeter, set up motion sensors, and assigned observation posts manned in pairs. Around midnight, during a watch change, we suffered our first loss. Corporal Jenkins, callsign Ghost, was on post with Sergeant Kowalski, covering the northwestern sector. Kowalski later reported hearing a dull, heavy impact very close by, literally a few feet behind Jenkins, immediately followed by a short, savage snarl. He spun around instantly, rifle raised. Jenkins was gone. No scream, no sound of struggle. Only the rapidly receding sound of breaking branches and the heavy, fast footsteps of something massive disappearing into the impenetrable thicket. We immediately put the whole squad on alert and organized a search in the estimated direction. The search was brief and fruitless in terms of rescue. We found his M4A1 carbine, discarded on the ground. Deep marks resembling huge fang imprints marred the sturdy polymer stock. Nearby, a few large drops of blood on the leaves and signs of a brief, violent struggle. Churned earth, broken lower branches of a shrub, and the same, now familiar, enormous tracks of a bipedal creature with claws. They led away from Jenkins's last known position into the dense jungle with powerful long strides, the distance between them speaking of the creature's incredible power and speed. Losing a man is always a devastating blow to any commander and unit. But protocol and common sense dictated one course: continue the mission. Pursuing an unknown creature at night, along a trail left by something that had just silently eliminated one of our own, was tantamount to suicide. I gave the order to ratchet security to the maximum, break camp, and move out only at dawn. The next day began with a heavy, silent march. Jenkins's loss hung over the squad like an invisible weight, intensifying the already oppressive atmosphere. We moved along the trail, which led us ever deeper into the wild, untrodden regions of the Sierra Madre. The tracks were clear, deep, as if the creature no longer cared about stealth. Around midday, the route brought us to a narrow, rocky gorge. Its floor was choked with thick brush and scree, while sheer walls rose 50 feet on either side, creating a natural bottleneck. Ramirez indicated it was the only way through the ridge of hills ahead. Instinct screamed danger, but the trail led directly into it. We began traversing the gorge, moving in a dispersed formation, meticulously scanning the slopes and thickets. The tension was at its breaking point. The attack came suddenly, swift, and with animalistic fury. From the dense brush on the right flank, something immense burst forth with a deafening roar. It moved with incredible speed, smashing through brush and saplings like matchsticks. In those brief, chaotic moments of the first contact, we got a clear look at it. The creature was monstrous. Around 8 feet tall when it reared up on its hind legs and at least 5 feet at the shoulder when moving on all fours. Its powerful, muscular body was covered in thick, dark, matted fur. Disproportionately long and powerful limbs ended in enormous claws capable of shredding not just flesh but wood. An elongated, bestial snout held a wide maw filled with massive, yellowish fangs. Eyes burned with a malevolent yellow fire in the gorge's dim light. It resembled a nightmarish hybrid of a giant wolf or wild dog and a human, but it was something far larger and more terrifying. We instinctively opened fire. The M4A1 carbines, chambered in 5.56 mm, roared in the confined space of the gorge, echoes amplifying the sound manifold. Dozens of rounds struck the creature's massive form. It roared in fury, but seemed barely to notice the hits. Bullets either ricocheted off its unnaturally tough hide or buried themselves in thick muscle without apparent effect, without slowing its charge. It kept coming, ignoring our fire. Sergeant Rizzo tried to stop it with a burst from his M240B machine gun, chambered in 7.62 mm, but the beast swatted him aside with a lightning-fast movement. Before we could react, it seized the sergeant in its jaws and dragged him into the dense thicket on the opposite slope with a single wrenching motion. Rizzo's scream cut off almost instantly. Private Chang, closest to the point of attack, fired his M320 grenade launcher. The 40 mm HED-EP, high-explosive dual-purpose, round detonated near the creature, enveloping it in smoke and dust. This forced the beast back momentarily, eliciting a deafening, vibrating roar that seemed to make the very air tremble. The sound wasn't just loud. It penetrated deep, paralyzing the will, invoking primal terror. Several men froze for a fraction of a second, unable to move. Seizing this moment of hesitation, the creature lunged toward Cheng. A swipe of its clawed paw struck him with monstrous force. The claws punched through his standard-issue IOTV body armor like cardboard, sinking deep into his chest and abdomen. Chung collapsed, his body horrifically mangled. The beast, letting out another furious snarl, vanished back into the thicket as quickly as it had appeared, leaving us in shock, with 2 more dead and the bitter realization of our own vulnerability. It was brutally clear. We were facing an adversary of incredible strength, speed, and durability, against which our standard small arms were practically useless. After the short, savage firefight, as the adrenaline began to recede, replaced by cold dread and fury, Ramirez approached me. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with resolve. Seeing our losses and our state, he finally revealed more. El Hombre Perro, the Dogman, not just a local boogeyman for tourists. A real, physical entity, known in the deepest corners of the Sierra Madre for its bloodlust, territoriality, and near invulnerability to conventional weapons. Legends passed down through generations spoke of it as an ancient evil dwelling in the mountains. Ramirez mentioned possible weaknesses, though he himself sounded skeptical. Fire as a deterrent for any wild beast, and possibly silver. The latter seemed tied to European werewolf myths and less credible for this creature. But in desperation, you grasp at straws. His words confirmed my assessment. Standard combat tactics against such an opponent were suicide. We needed a radical change in approach. Use the terrain to our advantage, set traps, employ heavy weaponry, and crucially, fire. I ordered a check of our incendiary rounds for the M320 SS and told the men to prepare improvised means, perhaps using fuel and available materials to create fire barriers or even crude incendiary devices. The shock from the recent attack and the loss of Rizzo and Chang mingled with cold fury and the imperative to act. We couldn't simply retreat. First, orders were orders, no matter how insane they now seemed. Second, this thing had taken 3 of our men. Leaving it unanswered was unthinkable. Based on the direction the creature had dragged Rizzo's body and Ramirez's assertion that such predators usually have a lair or permanent den, we began a methodical search. Ramirez suggested the creature likely took its prey to a secure location. We moved slowly, inspecting every suspicious area, every cave mouth or crevice in the rocks. The trail was clear matted grass, broken branches, occasional blood drops. After half a day of tense searching, as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in crimson hues, we arrived at a small waterfall cascading down a rocky ledge. The sound of falling water masked other noises, but it was here that Ramirez pointed to a barely visible trail leading behind the curtain of water. Approaching closer, we saw it. An entrance to a dark fissure hidden behind the falls. Clearly an old, abandoned mine, or a natural cave expanded by human hands. The edges of the opening were scored with deep claw marks, fresh and old. From the dark void emanated a chill and the same repulsive sharp musk, now mingled with the heavy stench of decay. This was the place. Switching on our tactical lights, we cautiously entered. The first few dozen yards consisted of a narrow, winding tunnel. The walls were damp, coated in slime, and spattered in places with dark stains of dried blood. The air was stale, heavy, making breathing difficult. Soon the tunnel widened, opening into a more spacious mine drift. What we saw there froze the blood in our veins. This was the lair. In the beams of our lights, a horrifying tableau unfolded. A massive pile of bones, human and animal, heaped in a corner. Skulls with crushed vaults, shattered ribs, gnawed limbs. Amidst this nightmare, we identified remnants of hiking gear, scraps of local clothing. And there, near the top of the grisly mound, lay the torn body armor and crushed helmet of Corporal Jenkins. His remains were scarce, just a few large bone fragments bearing the marks of huge teeth. The sight was so monstrous that even hardened Delta operators recoiled. But the search had to continue. We split up slightly, checking side tunnels branching off the main drift. In one of the farther, partially collapsed tunnels, we stumbled upon an even stranger find. Here lay the remains of another group, decayed military uniforms, clearly not contemporary. The cut and camouflage pattern suggested the 70s or early 80s. Nearby lay outdated equipment, bulky radios, what looked like geodetic instruments, containers marked with faded biohazard symbols. And amongst it all, a field journal in a worn leather binding, miraculously preserved in the damp environment. I carefully picked it up. The pages were stuck together, the ink blurred in places, but parts of the entries were legible. They were written in a trembling hand, words jumping, sentences breaking off. The text was filled with terror and despair. The author described encounters with a creature, its incredible strength and ferocity. But most importantly, the entries repeatedly mentioned a Sierra experiment and a code name that looked like Project Kynos, from the Greek Kynos dog. It spoke of an attempt to create, or perhaps control, the perfect predator for military purposes, an experiment that had gone catastrophically wrong. The final entries were incoherent, filled with madness and terminal terror. The diary and the equipment were the missing pieces of the puzzle. It became crystal clear. Our command, and possibly the Mexican government, knew about this creature's existence. Or worse, they knew about the failed experiment that spawned it. This previous expedition, which perished here decades ago, was somehow connected to that project. Our mission wasn't just neutralizing a dangerous creature. It was likely a cleanup operation, meant to erase all evidence of the failed experiment. And we, Spectre Team, were not the hunters in this game, but the bait, expendable assets intended to either eliminate the target or die trying, taking the secret with us. Perhaps they hoped to obtain new samples for study if we somehow managed to incapacitate the beast. I found Ramirez back in the main drift. his face ashen as he looked upon the remains of the previous group. I silently handed him the diary. He scanned a few pages, and his professional mask cracked. Under my direct gaze and the weight of the irrefutable evidence, he confessed. Yes, he knew about the prior expedition and that the official cartel leader's story was a lie from the start. His orders from Sison were to accompany us, provide assistance, and crucially, ensure that no compromising information about the past experiment surfaced. He didn't know the specifics of the Sierra experiment, but he confirmed a long-standing high-level interest in this subject and what happened here years ago. That realization changed everything. Now, we weren't just fighting a monster of flesh and blood. We were caught between a rock and a hard place, between the creature's fangs and the cynical calculations of those who sent us here. Trust in command evaporated. Our primary objective remained the same: survive and destroy this thing. But now it felt personal and profoundly treacherous. The discovery of the diary and Ramirez's partial confession forged a new, bleaker reality for our team. The atmosphere inside the cold, death-scented tunnels of the abandoned mine grew even more oppressive. We were deep in enemy territory, hunted by a monstrous predator, and now we knew that the command we swore allegiance to had used us blindly, possibly as expendable assets in an operation to bury the dirty secrets of the past. First thing, I tried contacting base using our encrypted gear, which surprisingly worked a bit more stably here underground, though interference persisted. I reported finding the remains of the previous expedition and requested clarification regarding Experiment Sierra and Project Kynos mentioned in the diary. The reply came quickly but was discouragingly brief and cold. Captain Cole, continue mission objective. Priority, neutralize target Fanged Shadow. Extraneous information is non-relevant to mission completion. Out. No explanation, no comment. Just an order to shut up and do our job. It was the worst possible confirmation of our suspicions. We were considered pawns, whose knowledge was inconvenient. The realization hit the remaining men hard. Sergeant Kowalski, who had lost his partner Jenkins under mysterious circumstances just a day earlier, became particularly dark and withdrawn. I saw open distrust in his eyes, directed not only at Ramirez, but I felt also at me, the commander who had led them into this trap. The tension between him and Ramirez thickened, ready to erupt into open conflict at the slightest provocation. I had to constantly monitor them, extinguishing sparks of mutual suspicion and animosity. Ramirez, though he'd revealed part of the truth, was clearly still playing his own game. He became more talkative, suggesting methods he claimed local hunters used to deter predators, burning certain types of pungent herbs, hanging specific charms near the mine entrance. It was impossible to tell if this advice was a genuine attempt to help, or an effort to distract us, buy time, or send us down a false path. The effectiveness of these folk remedies against a creature that shrugged off 5.56 mm rounds seemed highly doubtful. The psychological pressure intensified. We weren't experiencing overt hallucinations or voice mimicry sometimes reported in such anomalous zones, but the constant, draining sense of being hunted, the bestial growls that occasionally echoed from the deeper tunnels or from the jungle outside, the knowledge of our vulnerability and the betrayal by command, all of it worked corrosively on our nerves. The fear of a sudden attack from around any bend, out of any shadow, became almost physically palpable. Every scrape of rock, every gust of wind howling through the fissures made us jump and clutch our weapons. An incident occurred that further heightened suspicions. We decided to secure the approaches to the mine, setting up several Claymore anti-personnel mines and motion sensors in case the creature returned or tried to enter. While placing a mine on the trail leading to the waterfall, Hector Martinez, assuming Martinez is another team member introduced here for clarity, nearly fell into a deep camouflaged pit. A classic wolf pit lined with sharpened stakes at the bottom. It was clearly a man-made trap, not the work of our clawed adversary. Ramirez suggested it might have been left by local hunters, or perhaps descendants of some cult associated with this place, and possibly the Sierra experiment. But the shadow of suspicion inevitably fell on him as well. Was he trying to eliminate us one by one? We decided to temporarily fortify our position in the main section of the mine, mining not only the exterior entrance but also some of the inner passages leading into the deep, unexplored parts of the system. We set up additional sensors, but the feeling of security never materialized. Instead, it felt like we'd trapped ourselves inside. Strange sounds drifted from the depths of the mine, perhaps footsteps on stone or the scrape of claws on rock. Maybe it was just the play of drafts and cave acoustics, but none of us believed that anymore. After the booby trap incident, sensing our growing distrust, Ramirez offered another piece of information, perhaps trying to regain our confidence. He mentioned that local legends often connected El Hombre Perro, not only with its den but also with places of ancient power, abandoned ruins of some forgotten pre-Columbian civilization hidden deep within the mountains. He speculated that the creature's primary lair might be there, a place where it felt dominant, where its power was greatest. But perhaps, he added, it might also be more vulnerable there to unconventional methods, like fire, or something related to the ritualistic nature of such a site. It was a new lead, a new vector for action, but trusting Ramirez felt like walking a knife's edge. The decision was made. Remaining in this cursed mine, which served as both the creature's larder and a tomb for its victims, was tantamount to awaiting certain death. We were in an enclosed space, a perfect trap for ourselves. The illusion of safety created by the mined entrances evaporated completely after the wolf pit incident and the constant noises from the depths. Our only chance to survive and accomplish any part of the mission was to seize the initiative. Find the creature's main lair Ramirez spoke of, those ancient ruins, and attempt to destroy it there on its home turf. Use the element of surprise as much as possible, and every asset we had left, primarily fire, and if command had actually provided it, our heavy weapons. We exited the mine with the first hints of dawn, leaving behind the stench of death and the oppressive darkness. The path to the supposed ruins, guided by Ramirez, who navigated using subtle landmarks and his intimate knowledge of the terrain, led through the wildest, most impassable part of the Sierra Madre. We crossed deep canyons on precarious natural bridges formed by fallen trees, pushed through thorny thickets, and scrambled up steep, crumbling slopes. Every step demanded exertion and utmost caution. Signs of the Dogman were now everywhere. Huge paw prints in the damp earth, deep claw gouges on the trunks of ancient trees, clumps of dark fur snagged on bushes. It seemed the creature was no longer trying to conceal its presence. On the contrary, it felt as if it were leading us, luring us deeper into its realm of terror. As we neared the destination Ramirez indicated, the atmosphere shifted. The sense of dread that hadn't left us since Insertion intensified exponentially, transitioning from psychological discomfort into something almost physically palpable. This wasn't just fear of a predator. It was a primal, irrational terror emanating from the place itself. The air grew heavy, as if charged with static electricity. Sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature made us shiver despite the tropical heat. Sharp, suffocating odors, the same feral musk mixed with the smell of dried blood and something else, unfamiliar but foul, washed over us in waves. The men flinched at every rustle, every bird call, every falling leaf. Instincts screamed danger from all directions. We found increasing evidence of the creature's passage. Massive trees, several feet thick at the trunk, were scored and stripped of bark down to the raw wood, as if tormented by gigantic claws. We stumbled upon the mangled carcasses of animals. Deer, wild boar, left partially eaten. The tracks grew fresher, the prints deeper. Finally, after hours of grueling travel, we reached the edge of a deep, hidden canyon. Below, shrouded in mist and shadow, lay a complex of ancient ruins. Grim stone structures, half-ruined pyramids, and walls built from massive blocks covered in weathered reliefs. The architecture was unfamiliar, alien, ominous. In the center of the ruins rose the main pyramid. At its base, a dark void, the entrance to a cave or subterranean structure. Even from a distance, we could feel an ancient, dark energy radiating from the place. This was it, the lair. Descending into the canyon, we cautiously approached the entrance beneath the pyramid. The concentrated stench of the Dogman musk, blood and decay, was overwhelmingly strong here. A sepulchral cold emanated from the dark opening. The ground around the entrance was trampled and littered with bones, human and animal. Scraps of modern clothing, rusted buckles, old shoes, mute testimony to the fate of those who had wandered here before. The stones around the entrance were covered in a network of deep claw scratches. A quick reconnaissance confirmed it. Only one visible entrance at least. No chance for a stealthy approach. Any attempt at a quiet entry would be detected. Only one option remained. Go in hard. Use everything we had left. Incendiary grenades for the underbarrel launchers. The improvised incendiary mixtures we'd prepared from fuel and rags. Kowalski's heavy machine gun, if we could find a suitable firing position. Combat knives, if it came to close quarters. It felt like a one-way trip. We approached the dark maw beneath the pyramid. Kowalski placed a C4 charge on the stone slab partially blocking the entrance. Perhaps once a door or gate. We fell back to a safe distance, taking cover behind the remnants of an ancient wall. A deep, powerful explosion tore through the canyon's silence, echoing off the rock faces. The stone slab disintegrated, throwing up a cloud of dust and rock fragments. Without losing a second while the dust still hung in the air, we stormed the entrance, employing standard close-quarters battle, CQB tactics as best we could in the ancient labyrinth. The first thing that hit us was a suffocating wave of stench, a concentrated miasma of blood, excrement, and rot, far worse than in the abandoned mine. The air was heavy, cold, and still. Our tactical lights sliced through the darkness, revealing walls slick with dark slime and covered in bizarre, unsettling reliefs. The carvings were crude, primitive, but their meaning was clear. Figures, human or humanoid, worshipped a huge, monstrous creature resembling a wolf or dog standing on its hind legs. The architecture itself was a nightmare. Narrow, winding tunnels opened into small, irregularly shaped chambers, creating a maze perfect for disorientation or ambush. The creature didn't attack immediately. Instead, it began to play, using its knowledge of the labyrinth and the darkness to its advantage. We heard rustling sounds from side tunnels, a low growl that seemed to come first from the right, then the left, then above. Several times, rocks rained down from the ceiling, clearly dislodged deliberately, trying to cut off part of the group or induce panic. Our lights flickered again, radios hissed with static. The creature was toying with us, like a cat with a mouse, ratcheting up the tension, trying to separate us, fray our nerves before the final assault. Pushing deeper into this subterranean hell, we emerged into a more spacious cavern, and here awaited another confirmation of our worst suspicions. In the beams of our lights we saw the remains of the very expedition from the 70s or 80s mentioned in the diary. Several skeletons in decayed military uniforms were scattered across the cavern floor. Beside them lay shattered scientific equipment, sensors, vials, metal containers bearing faded biohazard symbols. And amidst the chaos, a damaged but recognizable data storage medium from that era, possibly a magnetic tape reel or cassette in a protective casing. This was irrefutable proof of the Sierra experiment. Someone had tried not just to study, but perhaps contain or modify this creature here, and they had failed utterly. As Doc Harris carefully tried to retrieve the data storage medium without damaging it further, the creature struck. It burst from a dark side tunnel with incredible speed, appearing silently from nowhere. Its target was Sergeant Michael Sparky Jones, our comms specialist, covering our rear. Before anyone could react, the creature seized him in its jaws by his body armor, and with a single wrenching motion, dragged him back into the darkness of the tunnel from which it emerged. Jones's scream was short, cut off almost instantly. Chaos. We opened fire sporadically into the dark tunnel, but it was too late. Jones was gone. Fury and desperation washed over us. Martinez, closest to the improvised flamethrower we'd rigged from a fuel bladder and nozzle, directed a stream of fire into the tunnel where Jones had been taken. A thick, orange jet of flame illuminated the twisting passage. From the depths, a deafening howl, filled with pain and fury, erupted. Fire, that truly hurt it. The creature didn't reappear immediately, but the howl continued to echo through the tunnels. We regrouped, processing the loss of another man. Now there were 4 of us operators: myself, Kowalski, Doc Harris, and Martinez, and Ramirez. Fire was our only truly effective weapon against this beast. We had to push forward, find its central den, and try to end it. We moved on, staying as tight as possible, covering each other. The labyrinth led us into a vast, almost cathedral-sized central chamber. The ceiling was lost in darkness far above. The walls were covered in the same ominous reliefs. In the center of the chamber stood a crudely hewn stone block about 4 feet high, resembling a primitive altar. Its surface was dark with dried blood and littered with clumps of dark fur. The stench here was unbearable, and the sense of malevolent presence reached its peak. And here, in the heart of its domain, the master of the lair awaited us. The Dogman stood by the altar, turning to face us. In the combined beams of our lights, it seemed even larger, more muscular than during our first encounter. Its fur was scorched in patches from the flamethrower attack, but this seemed only to have amplified its rage. Yellow eyes burned with pure hatred. It emitted a low, threatening growl and braced itself for the final battle. The final confrontation began without warning. The Dogman launched itself forward with terrifying speed, becoming a blurred dark shape. It didn't charge head-on, but utilized the vast chamber, the numerous stone pillars, and the deep shadows to its advantage. It darted around the perimeter, appearing first from one side, then another, delivering lightning-fast strikes before retreating back into the darkness. Its attacks were pure, primal aggression, devastating blows from its massive forepaws capable of crumpling steel, the snap of enormous jaws lunging for a limb. We answered with fire, but hitting such a fast and erratically moving target in the dim light was incredibly difficult. The 7.62 mm rounds from Kowalski's machine gun made it flinch and snarl furiously, but couldn't stop it. It was clear we couldn't simply outgun it. We shifted tactics, resorting to scorched earth. I ordered the use of incendiary grenades from the M320S. Several rounds detonated in different parts of the chamber, illuminating it with flashes of orange flame and restricting the creature's paths of maneuver. Fire clearly caused it intense pain. Each time flames licked its fur, it let out a piercing howl and recoiled. But the pain only fueled its fury, making its attacks even more savage and unpredictable. The primal terror the creature exuded reached its zenith. The sounds it made, a deafening roar that shifted into a soul-chilling growl that vibrated in our chests, worked on our nerves more effectively than bullets. I saw Martinez freeze for a moment, his eyes wide with horror. Kowalski was firing long, almost uncontrolled bursts. I had to shout commands to snap them back, forcing them to focus on the target, on teamwork, on survival. Fire, covering, Martinez, left flank, Kowalski, hold the center. In one critical moment, the Dogman broke through our cordon of fire. It swatted Martinez down with a powerful blow and charged directly at me and Doc Harris, who was fumbling to reload his M4. We were practically defenseless against the oncoming mass of death. And in that instant, Ramirez, standing slightly aside, made his final move. Whether he fired his pistol point blank, or simply threw himself in the creature's path with his knife, I couldn't tell in the chaos. But his action distracted the Dogman for a fraction of a second. The beast instantly shifted its attention to the new, closer threat. A short, gurgling cry from Ramirez, the sickening crunch of breaking bones. The creature literally tore him apart with a single motion of its monstrous jaws and claws. Ramirez's sacrifice, however futile it seemed, bought us precious seconds. As he died, he managed to gesture toward the stone altar in the center of the chamber and gasp out something unintelligible, words I thought sounded like source or anchor. Perhaps he had understood or remembered something vital from the legends or the classified reports he'd accessed. Was the altar somehow connected to the creature's creation or control within Experiment Sierra? Or was it simply the focal point of its power, its lair? There was no time to ponder. This was our only chance. While Martinez, scrambling back to his feet, and Doc Harris poured fire from everything they had left, including the last burst from the improvised flamethrower, which made the creature howl and momentarily retreat. Kowalski and I sprinted for the altar. Kowalski quickly slapped our last C4 charge onto the stone block. The Dogman, wreathed in flames and smoke, realized our intent. With a roar full of fury and perhaps, finally, fear, it charged toward us across the chamber, ignoring the agony of its burns. "Blow it!" I yelled at Kowalski, shoving him behind a pillar. He hit the detonator. A massive explosion rocked the central chamber. The stone altar disintegrated, sending up a cloud of dust and rock shrapnel. The Dogman, caught near the epicenter, was engulfed in the blast, thrown by the shock wave. It let out one last horrific, drawn-out howl that devolved into a death rattle. Its massive body, convulsing in agony, slammed onto the floor, still burning. The cavern shuddered from the blast. Stones began raining down from the ceiling. The collapse had begun. The explosion that obliterated the altar and, it seemed, the very embodiment of terror dwelling within these ruins, triggered a chain reaction. The ceiling of the vast chamber began to give way. Massive stone blocks and tons of earth crashed down with a deafening roar, burying the burning remains of the Dogman, the mangled body of Ramirez, and all traces of the monstrous ritual or experiment centered on that altar. We found ourselves in near darkness, choked by thick dust, deafened by the explosion and the thunder of the collapse. The air reeked of burnt flesh, cordite, and stone dust. When the roaring subsided, silence fell. An absolute crushing silence that felt louder than any noise. We cautiously emerged from our cover. The survivor count was brief. 3 of us remained: myself, Captain Cole, Sergeant Kowalski, and Staff Sergeant Doc Harris. Harris was badly wounded. Rock shrapnel had shattered his leg, and he was losing blood fast. Kowalski was concussed and had several lacerations. I'd escaped with bruises and minor burns. We had lost 4 operators in our liaison. The price had been exorbitant. Stumbling out of the collapsing chamber and the half-ruined complex onto the surface, we saw that day was already fading into evening. Miraculously, out here in the open air, our radio worked almost perfectly. I requested immediate medical evacuation, reporting mission accomplished, target neutralized, and heavy casualties. The response was quick, but strange. We were ordered to stay put and await extraction, without the standard protocols or call signs. Less than an hour later, a helicopter appeared over the canyon. It wasn't the standard Army MH-60 Black Hawk we expected. The aircraft was entirely black, devoid of any markings. It landed on a small patch of level ground near the ruins. Several figures emerged, clad head to toe in sealed hazmat suits with breathing apparatus, resembling a biohazard containment team. The cleaners. They asked no questions. 2 of them swiftly and professionally administered first aid to Harris, stabilizing him, then loaded all 3 of us aboard. As we were being lifted out, another team of cleaners was already at work in the ruins. They moved methodically, erasing all traces of our presence, the remains of the Dogman and Ramirez, the equipment from the previous expedition we'd found, including the data storage device Doc Harris had managed to secure before the final battle. They employed some kind of portable thermal device, reducing everything to ash and slag. The cleanup was total. We weren't taken back to the forward operating base we'd started from, but to another, unfamiliar facility. Likely a black site somewhere stateside. There, we endured a rigorous debriefing. It wasn't conducted by military personnel, but by the same men in severe civilian suits we'd seen at the initial briefing. They confiscated all our recordings, helmet cams, any potential data carriers. Our verbal report was heard with stony impassivity. Then they presented us with the official narrative. Our team had engaged superior forces of a particularly vicious cartel in an inaccessible region of Mexico. During the engagement, most of the team was tragically killed in action. We were the fortunate survivors. There was no Dogman, no ancient ruins, no Experiment Sierra. The order was unequivocal. Forget everything we had actually seen and experienced. Any attempt to reveal the truth would result in a court-martial for divulging state secrets of the highest classification. They made it chillingly clear that other, less formal consequences, an unfortunate accident, were also possible. We signed stacks of non-disclosure agreements, each paragraph dripping with threat. The data storage device recovered from the lair was confiscated without comment. We were returned to Fort Bragg under cover of darkness one by one. The physical scars healed, but others remained invisible. Nightmares became constant companions. The growl in the dark, the flash of yellow eyes, the scent of blood and musk. Paranoia, the feeling of being watched. Kowalski couldn't handle it. He started drinking heavily. His career in Delta quickly spiraled and ended. Doc Harris, as soon as he could walk properly, submitted his resignation, citing his injuries. I tried to hold it together, continue to serve. But what happened in the Sierra Madre changed me forever. During the gear clean-out, after our return, I found something the cleaners had missed. Wedged in one of the pouches on my plate carrier was a large canine tooth, its base scorched and melted, likely broken off the Dogman's jaw during the explosion or fire. I kept it. Sometimes I think I can feel a coldness radiating from it, catch a faint whiff of that feral, musky odor. But the deepest fear that haunts me isn't supernatural. It's human. Those behind Experiment Sierra, the ones who sent us into that meat grinder and then meticulously erased the evidence, they got what they wanted. Perhaps a DNA sample from this tooth I now possess. Perhaps the data from the storage device we recovered. The experiment isn't over. It's just entered a new phase. And we, myself, Kowalski, Harris, are dangerous loose ends, living repositories of forbidden truth. The question isn't if the spawn of Project Kynos will ever return. The question is, when will the people who created it come for us?